It started with a weird smell. I thought maybe an animal had gotten into the trash or something had spilled near the edge of the property. But when I walked around the back lot near the fence line, I froze. There, tucked between the trees and my shed, was a giant pile of garbage bags of it. Broken furniture, old paint cans, and what looked like construction debris. It wasn't just dumped carelessly, it was hidden. Like someone knew they weren't supposed to be doing it. At first, I assumed it was some random illegal dumping. But then I noticed something in one of the torn bags. A stack of envelopes said, "Rest." To Karen, the head of our HOA. Yep, the same Karen who sends violation notices if your grass is half an inch too long. The same one who once threatened to fine us for excessive wind chimes. I couldn't believe it. I tried to confront her, but she brushed it off like it was no big deal. Said it was yard waste and she was temporarily storing it. On my land, I didn't even get a chance to argue, because a few days later, things took a turn I never expected. A government vehicle rolled up. A guy with a clipboard stepped out, introduced himself. From the EPA. Apparently, that garbage pile wasn't just an eyesore, it was potentially a hazard, and that's when things really got out of control. You won't believe what they uncovered next. The EPA inspector didn't waste time. He walked straight over to the pile, pulled on gloves, and started poking through the trash like he knew exactly what he was looking for. My stomach dropped when he pulled out a rusted metal container that had leaked into the soil. He looked at me and said, "This could be considered hazardous waste. You didn't put this here, did you?" I shook my head and pointed to the envelopes. "We found with Karen's name on them." He jotted that down real quick, turns out. A neighbor had seen the pile and reported it anonymously, thinking it was some sort of illegal dump site. That's how the EPA got involved. And now that they were here, they had to do a full inspection. They took soil samples, photographed everything, and told me not to touch a thing until the results came back. Meanwhile, Karen was pretending like nothing was happening, still walking around the neighborhood with her little HOA clipboard, waving at folks, sending out emails about lawn height and mailbox paint colors. She didn't mention the dump pile once. But word was getting around fast. A few neighbors even came by asking if the EPA truck had something to do with the HOA, and the weirdest part, that wasn't the only garbage pile. A smaller one showed up near the back fence of another property also bordering Karen's. That's when I started wondering, just how deep was she into this mess? As more neighbors started noticing the second trash pile, the whole mood in the neighborhood shifted. People who normally stayed out of HOA drama began asking questions. Some even walked over to see for themselves. It wasn't just junk, it looked like pieces from small renovation projects. Old tiles, busted drywall, even a few containers with labels that said things like adhesive solvent and roof sealant. Stuff that definitely didn't belong on anyone's lawn, let alone dumped across property lines. A neighbor named Alina, who lives 2 doors down from Karen, came by with something surprising: a copy of a contractor's invoice she found in her recycling bin. The name on the invoice, Karen. It was for a garage cleanup and disposal just 2 weeks earlier. Alina swore she didn't throw it out, which means Karen likely dropped it in someone else's bin to cover her tracks. That's when it started to look like this wasn't just lazy dumping, it was a cover-up. EPA returned a few days later, and this time they looked a lot more serious. One of the inspectors quietly told me the initial soil test showed traces of harmful chemicals, nothing life-threatening yet, but enough to trigger a deeper investigation. If the contamination spread, it could lead to fines, cleanup costs, and possible legal action. Still, Karen stayed quiet. Not one word. She acted like none of it was connected to her, even though the clues kept piling up. And then, late one night, a camera I'd set up behind my shed caught someone creeping around the dump site again. That night, after getting the alert from my motion camera, I checked the footage, expecting maybe a raccoon or a curious neighbor. But what I saw made my heart race. There was a figure in a hoodie, slowly dragging one of the trash bags from the pile and disappearing behind the fence. They didn't move like someone cleaning up. It was more like they were trying to hide the evidence. I zoomed in and paused the video through the dim lighting. The figure looked a lot like Karen's son, Kyle. He's barely ever around. I'd seen him mow her lawn a few times the next morning. The bag was gone. Just ... vanished. But something new caught my eye. There were fresh tire marks along the back fence line, like someone had backed a truck or trailer through the edge of the woods. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd notice unless you were looking closely. I followed the tracks and they led to a side road that connects to Karen's driveway. That's when it started to click. Someone was actively moving the trash before the EPA could finish their testing. I shared the footage with the EPA and they immediately flagged it. They said tampering with an open investigation could make things worse for whoever's responsible. Meanwhile, neighbors were buzzing. Some defended Karen, saying there had to be a mix-up. Others were furious that their land might be at risk. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more tangled, a certified letter arrived at my door from a lawyer representing the HOA. I opened the certified letter expecting some sort of apology or maybe even a warning to stay quiet. But instead, it was something completely unexpected. Formal violation notice from the HOA, accusing me of creating an environmental hazard on my own property. The letter claimed the trash pile posed a threat to community safety and that I had failed to maintain clean land boundaries in accordance with HOA policy. I couldn't believe it. Karen had somehow flipped the whole story, and now the HOA was trying to pin the mess on me first. I thought it had to be some kind of clerical mistake. But when I called the number listed, the attorney confirmed it was real. He said the HOA had reason to believe I had been storing waste improperly and violating runoff laws based on an anonymous complaint. I didn't even have to ask who filed it. The timing was too perfect, and the accusations matched exactly what Karen would say to deflect blame to make things worse. The EPA had started marking more sections of my yard for deeper soil sampling. Not only was I dealing with an environmental inspection, but I was also staring down possible HOA fines and legal threats. The neighbors were split. Some thought I'd been set up. Others were unsure what to believe. And then, just as I was sorting through the paperwork, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was someone from Karen's past, and they had a story that changed everything. The voice on the other end of the phone belonged to a woman named Trish. She used to live 2 neighborhoods over and had served on Karen's old HOA board before. She moved 2 hours. Her tone was calm, but serious. "I heard what's happening," she said, "and you're not the first." She went on to tell me that Karen had pulled a similar stunt a few years ago, legally dumping renovation waste behind a community park and then blaming it on a homeowner who had challenged her authority. Trish said it got so heated that the board voted to remove Karen from her position. But before they could make it official, she resigned, packed up, and moved. Here I immediately shared everything with the EPA and submitted the call log and notes to their investigation team. I also gave a copy to the new HOA attorney who had recently taken over after the board began questioning Karen's involvement in other neighborhood disputes. Between the trail cam footage, the invoice from the contractor, Trish's testimony, and the results from the EPA's soil tests which linked the contaminants to products found in Karen's renovation, everything lined up. The HOA violation against me was dropped, and Karen was officially reported to both the county and state environmental agencies. Cleanup began, but not on my dime. Just when I thought it was over, I got one last surprise: a knock on the door. It was a county investigator asking if I'd ever seen Karen sign anything using asterisk. My name, asterisk. When the county investigator asked if I'd ever seen Karen forge my name, everything finally made sense. I remembered the HOA violation letter they claimed I had submitted a landscaping request months ago to restructure shared drainage areas. At the time, I thought it was just a mistake and ignored it. But the investigator explained it matched the pattern of how Karen operated. Start a mess, shift the blame, and bury it in paperwork. They launched a forgery investigation and found that my name had indeed been used on 2 HOA documents, one related to that drainage claim, and another giving verbal consent to use the backlot for cleanup staging. Both were completely fake. Karen was officially removed from the HOA board, and she's now facing legal consequences through the county for environmental violations and possible document fraud. The HOA has since hired a neutral third-party property manager, and several new checks were put in place so no single board member can act without full community review. The EPA completed the cleanup, and thankfully, the contamination didn't spread far enough to cause long-term damage. It's quiet again behind my shed, and the neighbors. They've started waving a little more often now that the garbage has settled.